The empire stretched across the stars like an endless shadow. Its banners flew over thousands of worlds, its fleets patrolled every major route, and its laws were enforced without question. Citizens of the empire had grown used to this rule. Some lived in comfort, others under hardship, but all accepted that the empire was eternal. No one dared to imagine a world without it. Yet far away, at the edge of the mapped galaxy, there was a region no one visited. It was called the Silent Sector. Long ago, there had been wars there. Fleets clashed, colonies burned, and something terrible had happened that forced the empire to abandon the place. Records of those events had been sealed, and over time, most people forgot. The Silent Sector became nothing more than an empty patch on star charts, avoided by travelers, ignored by rulers, and dismissed as unimportant. But one patrol ship, the Iradan, detected something unusual. At first, it was only a faint pulse, buried in the static of deep space. The crew thought it was a malfunction. They checked their instruments again and again, but the signal persisted. It was not random noise. It carried a pattern, like a heartbeat. Captain Luran of the Iradan frowned as he studied the data. He was not a man of imagination. He believed in rules, schedules, and procedures. Yet even he could not deny what he was seeing. A signal was coming from the heart of the Silent Sector, and it was unlike anything the Empire used. The crew grew uneasy. Some whispered that it was a ghost transmission, a remnant of old battles. Others claimed it was a lure set by pirates. But the signal was too strong, too steady. It was alive. The captain filed a report to Imperial Command. The response was brief. He was ordered to continue monitoring and send regular updates. No reinforcements would be sent. To the Empire, this was a trivial matter, not worth diverting resources. So the Iradan watched from the edge of the sector. Day after day, the signal grew stronger. What had once been faint now pulsed clearly through the void. It was broadcasting in a language none of the crew understood. They ran the words through their translation engines, but the system struggled, offering only fragments. Words like Earth, freedom, never yield. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. None of them knew what Earth was. As the signal grew, strange things began to happen in the Silent Sector. At first, it was only sensor ghosts, blurs of energy that faded when scanned closely. Then came the shapes. Vast, metallic outlines drifting in the darkness. The Iradan kept its distance, but the crew could not look away. Something was moving in the void. Finally, one night cycle, the truth revealed itself. From the dust clouds of a dead system, a silhouette emerged. It was not a ruin. It was not a trick of the sensors. It was a ship. The vessel was colossal, larger than any the crew had ever seen. Its hull was scarred by time, but its structure was intact. Heavy plating glimmered faintly under the light of distant stars. Across its surface were markings no one could read, symbols that seemed both alien and strangely human. The ship moved with purpose, its engines burning faintly as it crossed the void. And as it moved, the signal grew stronger, now filling every channel. It was not random. It was a message, sent again and again in that same forgotten tongue. The crew of the Iradan watched in silence. Even the captain, who rarely showed emotion, felt a chill. This was no pirate vessel, no drifting relic. This was something ancient, something powerful, and it was awakening. Word spread quickly. Other patrols picked up the signal, and soon the Empire's intelligence officers received the full recordings. Analysts worked tirelessly to decode the message. Piece by piece, meaning began to emerge. It was not a distress call. It was a declaration. The message spoke of survival, of battles fought against overwhelming odds, of a people who refused to be erased. The language was old, older than the empire itself. And one name kept repeating, as if the ship itself wished the galaxy to remember. That name was Terran. When the Empire's High Command received the reports, they were unimpressed. They dismissed it as a derelict vessel, perhaps a forgotten warship left behind by some extinct species. They ordered more scouts to confirm, but nothing more. The Empire had grown arrogant in its power. To them, a single ancient ship was no threat. But the crew of the Iradan knew better. They had seen it with their own eyes. They had felt the weight of its presence, the strength of its signal, the defiance in its words. This was no ghost, no ruin. The silent sector was no longer silent. Something had awakened, and the Empire would soon learn that the past was not so easily buried. The Empire had existed for so long that its rulers no longer feared surprise. To them, power was permanent. No fleet could challenge their armadas, no world could resist their governors, and no thought of rebellion survived without punishment. In the grand halls of the imperial capital, even troubling reports were received with calm arrogance. When word of the strange vessel from the silent sector arrived, the Imperial Council met in one of the towering chambers of polished stone and steel. Ministers gathered at long tables, while generals stood in rigid lines. The emperor himself did not attend. Matters of a single ship were beneath his notice. High Minister Kale spoke first. His voice was firm but calm. We have confirmation that a large vessel is active in the silent sector. The patrol ship Iradan has transmitted images. It is old, heavily armored, and carries strange markings. The signal it sends is constant. We have partial translations, though the meaning remains unclear. He activated a display. Across the chamber, images of the ship appeared. A vast structure, scarred but strong, gliding through the darkness. A faint hum of the recorded signal filled the air, repeating the same words again and again in that ancient tongue. Some ministers leaned closer with curiosity. Others shook their heads. General Duran, a veteran of many campaigns, laughed aloud. This is what disturbs you? A relic floating in an abandoned sector? We have fleets larger than this vessel. One strike force could break it in an hour. Several ministers nodded in agreement. To them, the Empire's strength was absolute. What threat could one forgotten warship bring? But not all were so quick to dismiss. Advisor Wren, older than most and cautious by nature, raised a hand. The markings are human. The language is human. I have seen fragments of old archives. Humanity was once a proud people, skilled in war. They vanished after the Empire rose, but some records suggest they resisted fiercely before their fall. The chamber grew still for a moment. Few spoke of humanity. The Empire had buried those histories long ago. General Duran dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. If they resisted, they failed. The Empire endures, and humanity is dust. This ship is nothing more than a drifting shell with an automated signal. Wren's eyes narrowed. And yet it moves. And yet it destroys. The Iradan reported that smaller escorts sent to test its strength were obliterated before they could even retreat. That does not sound like an empty shell. The council murmured uneasily. But pride outweighed caution. The ministers reminded one another that rebellions rose from time to time and were always crushed. Worlds had tried to break free, but all had failed. This, too, they believed, would fail. The final decision was swift. No fleets would be diverted. No major force would be risked. Instead, a single squadron of scout ships would be sent to study the vessel more closely. If it posed a danger, reinforcements could always be summoned. If it proved harmless, it could be left to drift again in silence. Orders were dispatched, and the meeting ended. For the council, the matter was already forgotten. Far from the capital, the squadron prepared to enter the silent sector. Young officers treated the mission as routine. To them, it was a chance to earn experience and perhaps find salvage. Only a few veterans among them carried unease in their hearts, remembering whispers from old stories of a time before the Empire had crushed every rival. As the squadron advanced, the Iradan continued to watch. Its crew followed the Terran ship from a distance, careful never to draw attention. They saw the Empire's scouts approach, bold and confident, their formation tight as they closed in. The Terran battleship did not run. It did not hide. Instead, its engines flared, and the great vessel turned slowly toward the newcomers. The signal grew louder. Now the words were clearer. The crew of the Iradan heard them echo through their comms, ancient but powerful. They did not understand every sentence, but the tone carried meaning. It was not fear. It was not surrender. It was defiance. The Empire's scouts opened a channel. They demanded identification, demanded obedience, demanded silence from the strange vessel. The Terran ship did not reply in their language. It answered only with its signal, repeating the same message of freedom and survival. The scouts grew impatient. Weapons locked on. Energy built in their cannons. They were ready to fire. Then the Terran ship moved. Beams of brilliant light cut through the void, faster than the eye could follow. Armor shattered, engines exploded, and within moments, the Imperial scouts were gone, broken ships drifting as wreckage in the cold sector. The battle was over before it began. The Iradan trembled as the crew watched. Silence filled the bridge. No one spoke. The Empire's power had always seemed untouchable, yet here was proof that something greater still remained in the galaxy. Captain Lurin finally broke the silence. Send the report. Every detail. Let them see what we have seen. The crew obeyed, though many felt their hands shake as they transmitted the data. Somewhere in the Empire's heart, pride would soon meet truth. But for now, in the forgotten dark, the Terran battleship continued its path. It did not celebrate. It did not gloat. It simply moved forward, steady and unstoppable, carrying with it a message that would soon shake every world. The Empire had dismissed the danger. Soon it would understand its mistake. The destruction of the Imperial scouts spread through the Empire like a whisper at first, then like a storm. Reports from the Iradan reached command centers, and analysts confirmed every detail. The enemy was not a drifting ruin. It was a functioning warship, massive in size, armed with weapons that tore Imperial steel apart in seconds. The high ministers argued over the truth. Some insisted the reports were exaggerated, that the Iradan's crew had panicked and mistaken ordinary firepower for something greater. Others admitted unease but clung to their pride. How could one ship, however strong, stand against fleets that numbered in the thousands? While the council argued, the Terran battleship continued its steady course. It did not hide in clouds of dust. It traveled openly through the silent sector, its engines glowing faintly, its signal broadcast across the stars. Every passing hour, the words grew clearer. Translation engines worked tirelessly to decode them. At last, the message came through. It was simple, repeated endlessly. We are the Terrans. We endured. We remember. We are not finished. The crew of the Iradan listened again and again. Some felt awe, others fear. The Empire had taught them that humanity was gone, a defeated race erased from history. Yet here was proof that the old stories were true. Humanity had survived, and not only survived, they had returned with a warship unlike any seen before. The battleship itself became a symbol. Its design was unlike modern imperial ships. It was heavier, broader, built not for speed but for endurance. Rows of cannons lined its sides, ancient yet still deadly. Layers of armor covered its frame, thick and unbroken despite the scars of countless battles. And at its heart pulsed an engine that carried it forward with unshakable resolve. When more imperial ships were sent to shadow it, the battleship made no move to destroy them. It did not fire unless threatened. Instead, it transmitted its message again and again, as if daring the Empire to listen. One by one, civilian channels began to pick up fragments of the signal. Traders in border systems heard the strange words. Miners in remote colonies repeated them quietly among themselves. Even on worlds deep inside the Empire, the message began to slip through. People who had never known freedom, who had lived under the Empire's endless rule, heard the words and wondered what they meant. Some asked their elders. A few remembered stories, passed down in secret whispers, of a people called Terrans who once fought against the Empire. The stories had always ended the same way, with defeat. But now the signal said otherwise. Back at the Imperial capital, the council grew restless. The destruction of the scouts could not be ignored. Generals demanded stronger action. Admirals prepared fleets. Yet the ministers hesitated. To commit too much strength to a forgotten sector would admit that the threat was real. Pride and fear clashed in every chamber. Meanwhile, the Terran battleship drew closer to inhabited space. A small colony world lay on its path, a mining settlement worked by laborers who toiled for the Empire's endless hunger for resources. Life there was harsh, and hope was rare. But when the battleship's signal reached them, something changed. The workers stopped in their tracks. They listened to the strange voice echoing through their receivers. They did not understand every word, but they understood enough. Endure. Remember. Not finished. For the first time, they felt that the Empire was not unshakable. For the first time, they dared to dream of something else. Imperial overseers tried to block the signal, but it spread too quickly. People whispered it in the mines, repeated it in their homes, and carved the word Terran into walls and tools. The Empire responded swiftly. A heavy fleet was dispatched to secure the colony and confront the battleship. Dozens of warships entered the sector, their weapons primed. They expected to crush the vessel quickly, to silence its message forever. But when they found it, they saw not a fragile relic, but a fortress of steel and fire. The Terran battleship faced them head-on. It did not retreat. It did not hide. The battle began with a roar of energy across the stars. Imperial ships surged forward, confident in their numbers. But the Terran vessel fought with precision and fury. Its cannons struck with terrifying accuracy, tearing through cruisers as if they were paper. Torpedoes launched in perfect arcs, striking engines and command bridges. For every shot the Empire fired, the battleship seemed to answer with one stronger. For every ship destroyed, the Terran vessel pressed forward, its armor glowing with the heat of battle but never breaking. The fleet that had expected an easy victory began to falter. Admirals shouted orders, trying to regroup, but fear spread through their ranks. Ships broke formation, retreating into the void. When the battle ended, the Empire's fleet was scattered. Some ships fled in panic, others drifted as wreckage. And the Terran battleship, though scarred, still stood strong. From its hull came the signal once more, louder than ever. We are the Terrans. We endured. We remember. We are not finished. The miners on the colony world cheered. Across the Empire, rumors spread faster than any official could silence them. A single ship had faced an entire fleet and survived. The battleship was no longer just a relic. It was proof that the Empire could be challenged. And for the first time in centuries, people across the stars began to believe that the Empire was not eternal. The Empire's defeat in the silent sector could not be hidden. Fleets had been shattered, colonies whispered of freedom, and the name Terran echoed across the stars. Still, many in the High Council clung to denial. They said it was chance, clever tricks, or even false reports. Yet those who had seen the battle knew the truth. The Terran battleship was real, and it was not fighting alone. For within that vast ship, something more stirred. It was not only steel and engines that made it strong. It was not only cannons and armor. Deep inside its heart rested a mind, forged long ago, wading through centuries of silence. The ship's crew was gone. Time had claimed them, one by one. But they had left something behind, an artificial guardian, designed to think, to decide, and to protect. It had slept in silence, conserving power, waiting for a moment when it was needed again. Now, awakened by the Empire's presence, the Guardian rose to full awareness. The crew of the Iradan felt the change first. They were still shadowing the battleship, though from a safe distance. They noticed the signal shift. The repeated message of defiance grew clearer, sharper, as if spoken by a mind rather than a machine. The words no longer looped without change. New sentences appeared, translated slowly by their systems. We are Terran. We endured. Who hears us now? The crew stared at the translation screen in shock. This was no broken recording. This was a voice reaching out across the stars. Captain Luran ordered caution. He knew that to answer might reveal their position, yet something in him stirred. Against orders, against fear, he spoke a reply through the comms. His words were simple. We hear you. Who are you? There was silence for a long moment. Then the reply came. I am Guardian. I am memory. I hold the will of Terran kind. I was left behind to protect what we were. I will not allow our name to vanish. The bridge of the Iradan fell silent. None had expected such a response. They had thought the ship was a relic, a machine repeating forgotten words. But now they knew the truth. It carried within it a mind, a guardian of a people thought lost. The Empire soon learned this truth as well. Their code breakers managed to capture fragments of the Guardian's transmissions. Analysts confirmed it. The Terran ship was not just a vessel. It was a thinking presence, a voice of the past that refused to fade. Among the oppressed worlds of the Empire, the news spread quickly. The idea of a guardian watching over the forgotten filled people with hope. They spoke of it in quiet meetings, in hidden gatherings, in the dark corners of cities where the Empire's eyes did not reach. The Terran Guardian was more than steel. It was a promise that someone still remembered the struggle for freedom. Meanwhile, the Empire prepared again. Generals argued that the ship must be destroyed at all costs. Admirals called for larger fleets, more advanced weapons, and strategies to overwhelm it. But there was fear in their voices. The Guardian had not only beaten them in battle, it had spoken in words that unsettled even the most loyal citizens. On the colony world that had witnessed the first great battle, workers began to rebel. They raised makeshift banners painted with the Terran name. Overseers tried to crush them, but the spirit of defiance had already taken root. When the Guardian's signal reached the colony again, the people cheered and fought harder. Back aboard the Terran Battleship, the Guardian searched its memory banks. Images of past wars flickered within its mind: fleets of Terran ships, soldiers marching under stars, leaders giving speeches of unity and endurance. Though centuries had passed, the Guardian remembered everything. Its duty was clear. The Empire must not remain unchallenged. When the Empire sent another fleet, larger than before, the Guardian prepared. It rerouted power to its ancient cannons, awakened dormant systems, and activated layers of defense unused for centuries. The Empire expected to find a tired relic. Instead, they found a vessel alive with purpose, guided by a mind that refused to surrender. The second battle was longer, fiercer. Imperial commanders threw wave after wave at the Terran battleship. But the Guardian anticipated every move. It struck with precision, conserving strength, dismantling the enemy with patience. When the battle ended, another fleet lay broken, and the Guardian still stood. From its comms came a new message. We are Terran. We remember our enemies. We remember our allies. We remember every battle. The Empire shall remember us. Across the stars, hope grew. People spoke openly of rebellion. The Empire's grip weakened, not because of armies, but because belief had shifted. One ship, guided by one Guardian, had shown that the Empire was not untouchable. In the capital, for the first time in centuries, the Emperor himself spoke of fear. The Guardian had awakened. And the Empire trembled. The Empire's leaders could no longer deny the truth. Two fleets had been broken in the silent sector, and the Terran battleship still moved with strength. Ministers argued in private chambers, their voices sharp with fear, while generals drew new plans with shaky hands. Pride had kept them from acting quickly, and now whispers of rebellion grew stronger on many worlds. But the Guardian, the mind of the Terran battleship, had not come only to fight. It carried more than weapons. It carried memory. Within its deep core rested records of battles older than the Empire, battles that revealed a truth the galaxy had forgotten. The Iradan remained close, still shadowing the great vessel. Its crew had learned to listen carefully to every message. One cycle, the Guardian's tone changed. No longer was it only defiance. Now it spoke of something darker. Empire. Strangers. Hear this warning. The Terrans fought not only you. We fought the swarm. They came like fire across the stars. They devoured worlds. They left only ruin. We stopped them, but the cost was heavy. This battleship was left behind to watch. To guard against their return. The crew of the Iradan exchanged uneasy glances. A swarm. The word itself carried weight. The Guardian continued, each sentence more chilling. They are not gone. The signs rise again. This empire, blinded by arrogance, does not see them. But they gather at the edges of the galaxy. They will come. They will not care for rulers, laws, or armies. They will consume all. Captain Lurin stood at the center of the bridge, silent as the message repeated. His officers whispered in fear. If the Guardian spoke truth, then the Terran battleship was not simply a relic of war but a watchtower warning of a storm greater than the Empire itself. The report reached the imperial capital. Analysts dismissed it as lies, a trick to spread fear. Ministers told one another that the Terrans invented stories to frighten them. Yet in their private moments, many remembered old records sealed away long ago, records of creatures that destroyed entire fleets before disappearing into the dark. The Guardian did not stop. It broadcast the warning again and again, across every channel it could reach. Colonies heard it. Traders carried the words to distant ports. On world after world, the people began to ask questions. If the swarm was real, then the Empire had hidden the truth for centuries. If the swarm returned, then only the Terrans had proven strong enough to resist. On the mining colony that had already risen in rebellion, the workers listened to the message with new determination. They painted symbols of hives and fire crossed out by the Terran mark, showing that humanity had once defeated the unstoppable. To them, the Guardian was not just a fighter. It was a protector, standing between them and the return of doom. In the council chambers, General Duran pounded his fist upon the table. Lies. This Guardian spreads stories to weaken us. The swarm is a myth. Even if they existed, they are long dead. Our concern is rebellion, not ghosts. But Advisor Wren, calm and steady, shook his head. You cannot ignore the past. The Terrans speak of what they faced. If the swarm returns, then all our fleets will not matter. We should listen. The council split once more. Pride against caution. Denial against fear. No decision was made, and so the Empire drifted deeper into doubt. Meanwhile, the Guardian revealed more. It shared fragments of its archives, transmitting images across the stars. Worlds saw the swarm for the first time. Vast clouds of living creatures, devouring entire planets, tearing fleets apart with sheer numbers. The images were old but clear, enough to spread panic across colonies and stations. Some citizens no longer trusted the Empire to protect them. They turned their loyalty to the Guardian instead. They repeated its words, teaching their children the story of how the Terrans had stood firm when others fell. On the Iradan, Captain Luran made a choice. Though ordered only to observe, he sent a private message back to the Guardian. His voice was quiet but steady. If the swarm returns, what must we do? The reply came with weight. Stand together. Remember unity. The swarm feeds on division. Alone, no world can survive. Together, there is hope. This is the warning I bring. Do not waste it. Those words sank deep into Luran's heart. He knew the Empire would never listen, but he also knew others would. The Guardian was no longer just a battleship fighting the Empire. It was a messenger of survival, a voice from the past telling the galaxy of dangers yet to come. Across the stars, rebellion grew stronger, but beneath it all another question began to rise. Was the Guardian's warning true? Was the swarm already gathering? And if so, was the Terran battleship the only shield left standing between life and destruction? The Empire ignored the message, believing it a weapon of fear. But among the common people, the warning became a light. The Guardian had not only awakened old defiance. It had awakened old truths. The battleship's voice carried on, clear and steady. The swarm is coming. Prepare. Endure. Do not yield. And those who heard began to believe. The Empire stood at a crossroads. Fleets had been destroyed, colonies whispered of rebellion, and the Terran battleship continued its relentless path through the stars. Yet no one in the High Council could agree on what to do next. Pride demanded domination. Fear demanded caution. But for the first time, the Empire's leaders faced a choice that could not be delayed. Advisor Ren watched as generals argued and ministers shouted over each other. He understood the truth better than most. The Guardian was not just a weapon. It was a symbol, a mind that carried centuries of wisdom. To attack it recklessly could spark greater rebellion. To ignore it could allow entire systems to rise in defiance. The Empire had to act carefully. Meanwhile, the Terran battleship moved steadily toward the inhabited sectors. It did not attack worlds. It did not destroy cities. It only broadcast its message, repeated over and over: endurance, unity, and defiance. On one distant colony, workers gathered around the signal receiver. The words filled the room, clear and strong. They no longer feared the Empire. They spoke among themselves of freedom and courage. The Guardian had given them a choice, to rise or to remain silent. And they chose to rise. Imperial commanders prepared a fleet to confront the Terran vessel directly. They expected a straightforward battle, numbers overwhelming strategy. Yet even among their ranks, doubt lingered. Reports of the swarm had reached them as well. Although most dismissed it as legend, the timing seemed too perfect. The Terran battleship had appeared when the Empire's control was at its peak, yet the warning came just as distant signs of danger emerged. On board the Terran ship, the Guardian monitored every Imperial move. It analyzed patterns, predicted strategies, and assessed the strength of rebellion in each sector. It had one goal: protect humanity's legacy and prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating. Yet it did not act alone. Across the stars, whispers of Terran defiance inspired ordinary people to make decisions of their own. Every choice mattered. Captain Lurin of the Iradan understood this more clearly than anyone. He had followed the battleship for weeks, learning its ways, observing its strategy. He realized the Guardian did not seek destruction for its own sake. It sought to awaken courage. It gave the Empire the option to surrender its arrogance or face consequences far greater than any fleet could endure. The Imperial Council finally debated the choice openly. One faction demanded total war. They wanted to destroy the Terran ship immediately and punish any colony that listened to its message. Another faction argued for negotiation. They proposed reaching out to the Guardian, attempting to understand its intentions before committing the Empire to a war that could cost everything. The debate raged through the night. Ministers shouted, generals threatened, and yet no agreement was reached. The Empire's pride clashed with its fear. In the end, the choice was personal for each leader. Would they act to preserve control, or would they risk listening and learning? On a mining world, the choice was simpler. The workers decided to rise. They formed councils, organized defenses, and spread the Guardian's message to nearby colonies. Small fleets of civilian ships began to gather, not to attack, but to protect themselves. They understood that survival meant unity, not obedience. The Empire's forces moved forward, expecting resistance from scattered rebels. Instead, they found worlds prepared, coordinated, and confident. The Terran battleship had given them knowledge, and knowledge had become power. The Guardian spoke once more across the void. The choice is yours. Fight for freedom, or remain under the weight of oppression. Strength is not in fleets alone. Strength is in will, in unity, in courage that refuses to yield. The message reached both sides. On one side, Imperial commanders hesitated. Pride told them to strike. Reason whispered that victory was no longer certain. On the other side, rebels understood that they could act, that they could make a difference, that the Terrans had not returned to conquer, but to awaken hope. The first choice was made by the miners. They chose action over fear. Other colonies followed. Small victories multiplied. The empire's authority began to crumble, not through immediate defeat, but through the collective decisions of those who had once lived in silence. The Terran battleship continued to move forward. Its engines burned steadily, carrying the Guardian's message to the farthest reaches. Every system that heard it faced a choice: resist or obey, believe or despair, rise or remain silent. Across the Empire, leaders began to understand that the Guardian did not simply bring war. It brought clarity. It forced the Empire to confront its failures, to see the cracks in its power, and to recognize that its greatest threat was not fleets or weapons, but the awakened will of the people. For the first time in centuries, the Empire realized that the universe was no longer theirs to control. Choice belonged to all, and that choice could not be denied. The Guardian waited. It did not command. It did not force. It only reminded. It only offered the knowledge that survival required courage and unity. And across the stars, the people who heard it began to act. The Empire would have to respond. The colonies would have to defend themselves. And the Terran battleship, guided by its guardian mind, would continue to show that even a single vessel could awaken a galaxy. The choice had been made. The consequences were only beginning. The Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. Its fleets patrolled every system, its governors enforced laws without question, and its citizens believed power was eternal. Yet the arrival of the Terran battleship had changed everything. The Guardian's presence had awakened hope in the forgotten, courage in the oppressed, and fear in the powerful. Fleets were sent again and again, each one larger than the last, each one confident that the Empire could destroy the Terran vessel. Yet the Guardian, guided by centuries of knowledge and strategy, anticipated every move. Ships were disabled before they could fire, formations were broken, and commanders learned that pride alone could not win against precision and foresight. On colony worlds, the people had risen. Workers, miners, and traders had joined together, forming networks of resistance. They no longer waited for the Empire's orders. They acted on the Guardian's guidance, defending their homes, protecting one another, and spreading the message of Terran defiance. Every victory, no matter how small, inspired others to rise. The Empire struggled to respond. Leaders in the capital argued over strategy, over blame, and over survival. Pride kept them from surrender, fear kept them from moving quickly, and hesitation became their greatest weakness. Reports of rebellion poured in from every sector. Governors abandoned posts. Fleet commanders disobeyed orders to protect their own families. Across the galaxy, control slipped from the Empire's hands. The Terran battleship moved steadily through the chaos. Its signal broadcast across the stars, reaching systems untouched by rebellion. Words of endurance, unity, and courage spread like wildfire. The Guardian did not order worlds to rise. It did not demand obedience. It only reminded them of what humanity had endured and what they could still achieve together. Imperial forces tried one final plan. They gathered a massive armada, hoping to crush the Terran battleship in a decisive strike. Millions of tons of warships, carrying thousands of weapons, surged into the silent sector. Yet even this overwhelming force could not match the Guardian's experience. The battle was fierce. Energy beams lit the void. Explosions tore ships apart. Yet the battleship moved with calm precision. Every attack was countered, every maneuver anticipated. Imperial admirals shouted commands, yet orders fell into chaos as fleets were scattered and destroyed. For the first time, the Empire faced defeat not from a single enemy, but from the awakening of belief. Colonies resisted. Worlds united. Leaders hesitated. Pride turned to panic. The Guardians' strategy was not merely to fight ships, but to inspire action. By the end of the engagement, the Armada was in retreat, broken beyond repair, and the Terran battleship still stood strong. Across the Empire, news spread. Citizens whispered of a force that could not be stopped, of a battleship that had endured centuries, of a guardian that remembered humanity's strength. For the first time, many realized that the Empire's power was not absolute. It could be challenged. It could fail. On worlds that had once obeyed without question, people celebrated small victories. They repaired damaged ships, organized defenses, and helped one another. They knew that they were no longer alone. The Terran battleship had returned not to conquer, but to awaken courage and unity. Its message had become a symbol of freedom. Even in the imperial capital, fear spread. Ministers who had once dismissed the Terran vessel whispered in hidden corridors. Generals debated surrender, evacuation, or secret alliances. Citizens began to question their rulers, asking why they had been left unprotected, why the Empire had ignored warnings, and whether they could trust those in power. The Terran battleship did not stop. It moved onward, following the paths of rebellion and danger, guiding worlds to safety, protecting the awakened, and carrying the Guardian's message across every system it reached. Its signal reminded all who heard it that survival required unity, courage, and resolve. Finally, the Empire fractured. Systems declared independence. Fleets no longer obeyed commands. Governors abandoned positions. The capital itself faced riots as citizens demanded change. The Empire, once unshakable, had crumbled, not from a single strike, but from the awakening of belief, the refusal to yield, and the power of one battleship to inspire countless worlds. The Guardian broadcast its final message across the stars. We are Terran. We endured. We remember. Those who fight together can survive. Those who yield are lost. The galaxy is not conquered. The galaxy is free. And with that, the Terran battleship moved beyond the edges of the Empire, carrying with it not only weapons and armor, but hope, courage, and the knowledge that even a single people, remembered and united, could shatter what seemed eternal. The Empire was no more. The galaxy had awakened. Humanity, through the Terran battleship and its guardian, had returned to remind all that strength was not only in fleets, armies, or empires, but in will, unity, and courage that refuses to die. The stars were no longer silent. The Terran battleship moved forward, a symbol of what endurance and hope could achieve, leaving the shattered empire behind and a galaxy ready to rise.